Today on the back end, we're getting straight to the point with one of Amazon's top sellers.
And you got to grind.
Exactly.
You got to be willing to grind. Our ads went like totally sour. Put, $5,000 in there, get $20,000 back. Like 2 months later, I was like, what?
Meet Aaron, founder of Impreza Products. He scaled Impreza from just $12,000 in cash to a $40 million Amazon FBA empire, all without any outside funding.
We put in $12,000 in cash.
Yeah.
And, we turned that into $40 million of revenue, very profitable revenue. I want you to maximize my profit for these products over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Not the next 6 months, not the next month, not a year from now.
Yeah.
What will you learn today from the back end of Impreza? 3 simple truths about building a brand, how Aaron sees Amazon PPC differently from everyone else in the world, and how a treadmill lubricant changed this man's life.
I mean, we produced a bunch of it ourselves. It was a lubricant for treadmills. And if you can hit that maximal place of that area under the curve, boom, that's like, how could you beat that? That's the number one way to succeed.
Let's get started.
All right, Aaron, I am so excited to kick this off. We've been talking about this for weeks, so I'm so glad to have you here. Quick intro on me. I'm Matt, founder and CEO of Laurence. We automate Amazon PPC for brands so you never have to think about your ads on Amazon again. I used to be a machine learning engineer at Google and Meta, and I was a math and computer science double major at Cornell. And Aaron over here is an under-the-radar legend in the Amazon space. You built a brand, Impreza Products, starting from just $12,000 and scaling it all the way to $40 million at its peak. You ended up exiting, and when you exited, you were a top 75 Amazon third-party seller. You ran a PPC consultancy then afterwards for a few years, and then you loved Amazon so much you started another brand and are still at it now.
Yep.
So tell us, what's the number one skill you've learned that has really helped you build and scale a business on Amazon?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things. I think one thing is around the logistics and supply chain, which has been huge. So just staying in stock, keeping your costs down, never getting to a point where, you're losing money if you have to fly inventory or you're out of stock for a couple weeks, because that really hurts your rankings. I mean, that's something that's always been the case on Amazon. So I'd say that's kind of the more tactical side of things. And then the more general side of things is you just have to get good at a lot of different things. And you need to figure out how to do a lot of different things. I mean, when we started, we didn't know how to do anything. And there were some podcasts and there were some courses, and we kind of shied away from most of that and just basically went through thing after thing and just figured it out ourselves. So I think being really intellectually curious, figuring things out, trying things, just like seeing what works, which is obviously a general skill that works for kind of any business, but especially in the Amazon space, just because you have to do so many things pretty well if you want to beat the tens of thousands of other people who are all trying to build the same business that you are.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And just for the viewers, can you just explain why specifically staying in stock is so valuable?
Yeah. So Amazon really prioritizes staying in stock, being in good stock when it comes to search rank. There's a lot of things you can do to help your search rank, but there's not a lot of, extra levers you can pull. So you just kind of, again, have to do a lot of things well. You have to have good images, you have to have good keywords, you have to have good, on-page SEO, you have to have good reviews, obviously, but you can't really control that. And so staying in stock is kind of the biggest factor there, is staying in stock with your ads on as much as you can. Just keeps that momentum going on Amazon. And that's really, really important.
Perfect. That makes total sense. So you've been selling on Amazon since 2014, right? And what were you doing before this? And how did you get into the whole Amazon space?
Yeah, so I started my career out of college. I was in undergraduate business school at WashU in St. Louis.
Great school.
Would say B school, yeah.
No, I said great school.
Oh, yeah, it was a great school, yeah. And did finance, basically a strategy and entrepreneurship. And so I knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I knew that kind of I wasn't ready straight out of college. So I went to work in investment banking at JP Morgan in 2008, 2009.
Also a great bank.
Great bank, but crazy times. Everybody was getting laid off. It was great financial crisis. I remember sitting in our training room and watching the Dow go down at 1,000 points, which at that time was a big deal. Now it's like, oh, okay, that's just Tuesday.
Yeah.
But, we remember sitting there kind of being like, what's going on? But then had a really good 2 years there, learned a ton, did super, super well, but knew I didn't want to stay in banking. And that's kind of what most people, they're like, get out if you can. And then I moved out to San Francisco to work at a private equity fund. And that was super interesting because it's a fund called Serent Capital. It's a bit different now. They've done really, really well. And now they're more of a software private equity fund. But back then they would look at everything. So anything between kind of $10 and $30 million of revenue, $3 to maybe $8 million in EBITDA. And we were investing everything from green pest control to software to financial services businesses, everything. And so I got to look at hundreds of different businesses, see what made them tick, learn from their founders, really understand how people were able to grow these businesses and build them. And kind of at the end of that, I basically got some feedback that you're like, hey, you're reasonably decent at this job. You'll probably be really good at doing your own thing, but the middle sort of that segment for you, being a VP, kind of being a middle manager, is probably not going to be great for you based on your skill set.
Right.
So I was like, okay, got to be an entrepreneur. And I'd always wanted to be. So then I went out and spent a couple years working on more startup-y sort of businesses, and that wasn't a real fit. And then, through a conversation with my, now business partner of over a decade, he basically was like, hey, I'm looking at this Amazon idea. I'm looking at this Amazon FBA model. I've heard about it on some podcasts. Like, would you want to look at it with me? I spent maybe 2 or 3 days looking at the space and then was like, oh yeah, this is a gold mine. Like we got to get into this. And then, so that's how we started Impreza.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to double click on the whole intellectual curiosity point you brought up earlier, because I think your background is just so incredible in the sense that, yeah, you did look at so many different businesses. You did try to think about, what made these different businesses tick and what made these founders successful at what they were doing. And I think that kind of willingness to learn and that kind of desire to seek out the truth was kind of a big reason for why you succeeded.
Totally. And especially then in Amazon, because when we got into it, there weren't really a lot of roadmaps. There were a couple of courses that you could take, which we didn't take. There was a lot you could learn online. There was no AI. You couldn't you couldn't get a summary of something. You just had to kind of hunt and peck around and figure all this stuff out. And that's kind of what we did. We basically designed everything we did from whole cloth, kind of like out of our own minds. And it ended up working out super, super well.
Yeah, and I think the point to really drive home here is that there's no quick solution to anything.
No.
You need to be in the weeds. You need to get your hands dirty, right?
And you got to grind.
Exactly.
You got to be willing to grind.
Yeah. And it's all that earned expertise that comes from really, really knowing the business inside out and knowing your category inside out. That's just so valuable.
Absolutely.
I want to talk more about Impreza and about your PPC there. So most folks listening to this are operators themselves. They kind of know the issues and the complexity with building product, finding suppliers, managing ops and logistics. You did all of this at Impreza while also managing PPC all on your own.
Yeah.
Completely incredible.
Yeah.
You're an absolute unit for that.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through the process of how you did that yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So when we got into Amazon, advertising was a really small component. You wanted to do all the things we talked about, right? Like staying in stock, having good images, good reviews, good customer service, all these different things. But advertising really just wasn't a huge part of it. It was only maybe 2% of revenue at the time. But very quickly I realized, whoa, you can pay to be number one in the search result. Like, okay, I'm willing to do that. Like, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. And so I started kind of diving into PPC on Amazon, but the tools were really terrible at the time. And I think PPC on Amazon at the time was something like $1 billion business. So like a very, very tiny portion of the revenue versus something like $200-ish million of gross merchandise value being sold.
It's actually $60 billion.
And it's a $60 billion business now. Exactly. Yeah. And it's maybe a $500 billion gross merchandise value. So that business has doubled. They're selling 2 times as much as they were, maybe 2.5 times. But PPC has gone up by 50, 60x, right?
Yeah.
So the tools were terrible. You basically had to do a lot of clicking. It was very manual. And again, there was nobody who kind of could teach you how to do it. And so I started spending a lot of my time because I was like, this is going to be really important. And what we started to see was a couple things. So one, a lot of gurus and agencies popped up and they're like, oh, we'll do your PPC for you and, we'll crush it. And I didn't really think they were doing anything special. And then there were some software tools that were coming out. And again, a lot of those software tools I didn't think were special at the time. Again, this was a different era. This was 2016, 2017. Machine learning was a thing, but not a lot of people were employing it, and AI was so far away from being a thing, right? This is almost a decade ago. And so I actually spent a bunch of time looking at one of the softwares in particular, which I thought was really good. This company called Prestazon. I think they ended up selling to Helium 10. And I thought they were doing a pretty good job. And I tried to get comfortable with letting their system kind of run it for us. And I ultimately wasn't, but I did learn a lot from working with them. And learn some principles of kind of how to do things. And I just employed those principles and tried to build my own systems to scale that up. And then, cut to the end of Impressa, and we were running a, $5 million, $6 million of ads kind of every year, for the last year or so. And it was huge spend. And so I spent a lot of time on it because it was basically, towards the end, after cost of goods sold and some Amazon fees, like it was our number one, after the kind of like basic things that are going to be in there, it was our number one expense, like by far. So I knew it was really important to get really good at it.
Yeah, 100%. That makes total sense. And I think, even today, like a lot of people talk about AI or talk about machine learning or talk about like advanced systems. But at the end of the day, like most of the solutions we've seen out there are basically just glorified rules engines, right?
100%.
It's like if else rules that people are trying to replicate their copy pasting to and from spreadsheets into a system. But what people don't realize is that these if else rules aren't actually real performance drivers.
Yep.
It's things like if a keyword gets 20 clicks and less than 2 conversions, then lower bids by 10%. Like, where does the 20 come from? Why is it 2?
Yep.
Why is it 10% and not 8% or 9% or 11% or 15% or 5% or 20%? It's just a bunch of like arbitrary heuristics that you throw around there that just make zero sense, right? So I think this is a good segue into meeting me and kind of the whole building of Laurence, right? Do you want to tell the story of how we met?
Yeah. So let me back up just one step. So, in running all this, running our own PPC, running it for Impressa, running it for my current business, doing a bunch of PPC consulting, I'm a finance guy. Right. So I'm really good at spreadsheets, but I'm not a software guy. And towards the end of Impressa, I thought about building some software. I had some really creative ideas and I kind of started going down the road with it. But then we sold the business and I was like, I'm good. I don't really feel like doing that. I'm exhausted. I had a very young child at the time. We had just moved to a new house. Like a lot of things were going on. And I was like, I need to take a break. And so I ended up, doing some of this kind of PPC consulting and then stepping away from that and working on some other projects, and actually hired an agency, which we can talk about at some point. But I'd always had some interesting ideas and been looking for somebody who was going to actually tackle the Amazon advertising space correctly and not just build another rules engine, because we don't need another rules engine.
Not at all.
And so we got introduced by a friend of mine who runs a kind of a one-man VC fund. And he introduces me to, 2 people a year for the last 4 or 5 years. Like I'm invested with him. We just chat about business and random things. And none of those intros had really gone anywhere. I had maybe advised somebody for a little bit and kind of talked to a couple other people. But then he introed me to you and he said, hey, I know this guy, Matt. He's working on a couple different like AI tools and he's looking at a couple different areas. And one of the areas he's working on is this Amazon space. And I was like, oh, let's go. So you were out here talking to some investment folks and just kind of getting a lay of the land. That's kind of how you ended up in YC, I think.
Yep.
And, we had coffee for an hour. And I could see were clearly very passionate, very high horsepower, like super committed, but you had some things kind of moving in the right direction, but you didn't exactly know where to like point everything and focus all the time. And I was like, hey, you're working on this Amazon stuff. I'm like, this is a $50 to $60 billion spend market. There's a bunch of agencies who don't really know what they're doing. There's a bunch of tools. I mean, they're fine. They're fine. Like they're not bumbling around in the dark, but they're not amazing. And a lot of them are doing the same thing. They're hiring kind of low cost, offshore talent. They're running the same playbook. Maybe they've built a little bit of their own software, but they're basically just running everything out of spreadsheets. And then there are these rules engines. And so we started talking about it, and I was like, I have a bunch of ideas. Like, let's see if we can work together. And, we started working together for the first couple weeks, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be amazing. Like, we're going to do such a good job here.
Yeah. I mean, so some context here as well. Like, what I was building to begin with before we met and before I actually learned about the true complexity and how like actually genuinely interesting this whole Amazon advertising problem was when I was at Google, I built the data science agent there. And within a year, that project basically stalled. I got our benchmark performance up to about 43%. And within the year, the team wasn't really able to beat that. I saw 25 different things that we could improve, that could be better. And I was like, okay, let me just do this on my own and try to make this into a business. And this is kind of the whole AI tools that we were talking about and the whole Amazon space. How I got into this whole area was that I got introduced to an agency and they wanted me to help build them some SaaS tools to get them more data about their Amazon advertising.
Totally.
Because it turns out a lot of these agencies don't even have the core infrastructure to even look at data in an organized manner, right? It's all about, like they're being reactive in the sense that they can only look at a window 2 days before, because otherwise they'd have to go copy paste numbers from the Amazon ads console or from like Amazon Marketing Cloud into spreadsheets that again run these like rules engines, right? And then I think the core unlock for us was that, hey, instead of building tools for other people to use, it was actually that, hey, the other people out there aren't even that sophisticated, and that, we could learn everything we needed to about the whole Amazon advertising industry and what worked and what doesn't. And then basically just build out our own models and our own statistical frameworks to basically do a 10 times better job without any of the manual overhead. So that's kind of basically like where we are now. We worked really closely for the first honestly few months, right, to figure out initial version of the product, to figure out the core strategic concepts behind the models. And it was actually a match made in heaven because me with like machine learning firepower, math and computer science stuff, my co-founder Leo, we haven't even talked about him yet. He's a quant on a Wall Street hedge fund, and he's also a professional poker player. We have the kind of math and statistics expertise to build something that can far outperform these rules engines.
Totally.
And you have all of like
I had the insider knowledge, and
exactly.
I had a bunch of like features where I was like, hey, nobody's ever built this before. If you build this, you can save 5% of your PPC spend a year just by building in this feature. Right.
Yeah.
And so we won't fully get into this because some of this is the secret sauce. But one of the things that I was super impressed by was like, you guys were iterating on those features in days or a week, not months or a year, right? And if you look at where most of these other software tools come from, most of them come from people who are good at Amazon, who are like, oh, I'll take these ideas and turn them into a software. Whereas you guys were like software and quantitative, understanding first. And then I kind of was like, well, this is the way that Amazon works. Like, this is the way that this works. This is the way that this works. And you're like, oh, okay. Now we get the framework of how to solve this problem really, really well. And then now you're iterating with a lot of data. And so the other thing is I was like, and full disclosure, I did invest in you guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it. I'm a small investor, but I'm invested. But the other thing that was really cool for me too was I'm like, I'm going to dog food this, right? Like I'm going to help you guys, work through iterations, and you would kind of come and be like, oh, it's doing this, we'd refine. And then it was like, okay, here's a couple products. Now here's a couple more products. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to fire my agency. Like, you guys get going. And you just took over the whole account. And I just sat back and I was like, I remember being like, checking in maybe a week later, and I was like, oh, our profit just went up 15% overnight. And actually, you reduced my ad spend, which is also kind of nice because, like, why spend more if you can spend less, right? Just from a cash flow perspective. I was like, oh, this is great. And then I haven't had to think about it since, which has been so nice because even though the agency was like doing everything, there were still meetings and questions, and I'd still be like, well, this is weird, and why is this happening? And then we'd have to talk about it, and I'd have to tell them. It's just so seamless. Like, I don't have to do any of that anymore. And it's like cut out hours of my time, even from having an agency, let alone doing it myself. It would cut out 10 hours a week of time.
I mean, we don't even have a Slack channel.
No, we don't even need it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I'll ping you, I'll send you an email every so often, be like, this. But That's it. It's so easy.
I mean, I was like, I think the whole dog fooding process was really, really like informative too, because I don't know if you remember, I was scared shitless.
No, I know you
like,
were.
I was so nervous because I was like, it's a big risk. Like I understood like, hey, actually when I learned more about the whole Amazon FBA business model, advertising is actually the single most important part of an Amazon business 100%. Once you have product, supply chain, and logistics figured out, right? And realizing this and knowing that we would basically deploy a fully autonomous system to basically like make like agentic decisions for us without any manual input was like, I could not sleep at night.
No,
I literally was like tossing and turning. I think I must have slept 2 to 3 hours each night for the first 3 weeks that we went live with you.
Yeah. But you were certainly way more nervous than I was because I was like, I think you guys are really smart. I think the other thing too is part of the reason I wasn't as nervous is because I could see that in you. And I was like, oh, he's not being like these guys aren't being cavalier. They're being really thoughtful and decisive, and they're double and triple checking their work before they deploy anything. And that's not to say that like every single little micro thing at first went perfectly well. You were building version 1 of a product. You're now on version, I don't know, 10.
Yeah.
But it went really, really well, like right off the bat. And I was like, okay, we're good here. Like I can just trust this and kind of let it go. And I knew that you and Leo were like obsessively checking and rechecking and building and rebuilding. I think you were like, you launched like 4 new versions within the first like 2 weeks, partially because you were getting a lot more data. But I just had complete confidence.
Yeah. I mean, for me, even now, like whenever we onboard a new customer, I like obsess over like the first 3 to 5 days of performance because it's like, okay, I want to truly understand what's going on.
Totally.
And I think as we're bringing on more and more customers and we're seeing how our model performs, like I'm at a stage where like, I'm pretty darn confident in everything, and it's great. And I think to go back to your point about how like we're iterating on the order of days and not months, I think it's a really important distinction to say, hey, we are like here to learn quickly, right? We are here to iterate quickly, right? And I think we are the first kind of like what you said, high horsepower tech folks to actually really take a real stab at this.
For sure.
Like I don't think anyone with like either my or Leo's backgrounds alone has tackled this, let alone us together. And I think this is a really exciting time because when I was talking to you and when you were explaining to me the whole intricacies of this advertising, I was like, this is so like obviously a huge problem.
Huge problem.
And I was like, I could not believe what I was seeing. I was like, it was incredible to me. Like it blows my mind because objectively running an Amazon business and running an e-commerce business in general is actually so much harder than running a tech startup. Like we both live in the Bay Area. We're kind of surrounded by the Silicon Valley hype. Everyone's talking about AI, like the death of SaaS, like building a tech business, like AI-enabled agencies, software-enabled agencies. And it's like, no one's actually like realizing how difficult running a physical products business is.
Totally.
Because not only do you have to find the same, like you have to find a customer problem, you have to find a solution to that, you need to verify that, you need to validate it, at a small scale, and then you need to scale that up. Not only do you have those problems that you have the exact same problems for running a tech business, but you also have to factor in cost of goods, right? There's a cash flow problem when you're scaling.
Random tariffs that come up and totally throw your business model for a loop. I think it's really easy for a lot of people to sit there and be like, and because there was a while on Amazon where you kind of couldn't miss. Like if you were reasonably smart and you were reasonably committed to it, like anybody could build a small business, right? Like pretty easily. And I know lots of people who built, 1 or 2 product businesses and were like, this is great. This is cash flowing me, a couple grand a month. Like this is a nice, side business for what I'm doing. But part of the problem was, which I think you see in general with a lot of businesses, but especially was evident with the Amazon businesses, was that you just heard from the winners, right? And so you heard from all these people be like, overnight, I built this huge business and it's crushing it. But you didn't hear about the 50,000 other people who tried to do the same thing and totally failed and would be on forums being like, how did you pick a product? Like, how did you find a supplier? Like, how did you solve this problem? How did you solve that problem? And you're like, I'm not going to tell you how I solved those problems. Like, it was really hard and I really figured it out.
Yeah.
But it was fun. And I think in some ways there's kind of a little bit of a mirror here, which was that when I got into the Amazon space, I was like, I think I'm pretty smart. I think I'm reasonably talented. Like, I think I'll be able to outcompete people. And I think you feel the same way, is you're like, I
100%.
feel like this problem is solvable. And I felt the same way. And people are just not applying the same level of horsepower and like level of commitment to it that they would apply to something else, right? And so if you're going to try to build the next X, in the Bay Area, super, super tough. You're competing with like the smartest people. You have to, like, if you're good at raising money, you might win. If you're good at building the product, you might win. If you're good at selling customers, you might win. Like, and you never know which one of those things necessarily is going to be the key factor. And so, yeah, I just think that, like, trying to be, smart about things and competing in a space where maybe not everybody is like looking at it can be a huge, huge key to success.
Yeah, and it's not even that, because I think, what partially, like, the majority of my kind of drive and like the reason why I think I'm like really aggressive with this business is because, to be honest, like I think it's pretty criminal that once folks figure out this problem with a product and then understand how to solve it via like some sort of product,
Yep.
and then figure out how to scale it, then when they figure out, okay, hey, I need to start running ads.
Yep.
All the solutions out there are trash.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
And it's just, I think about it from my perspective. And if I was like an operator, if
Yeah.
I was a brand owner, if I was a brand founder, and I spent, years of blood, sweat, and tears, like fine tuning a product and validating a market and like building out a brand. And
Yeah.
then once you've done all of that and you're ready to scale, nobody can actually like help you with
Yeah.
that advertising performance. I would feel so defeated.
Yeah.
I would feel so upset. I would feel so like I would feel like the world was against me. Right?
Totally.
It's a completely unfair experience.
Yeah, and let me talk about that landscape a little bit,
Yeah.
because it's really, really, really interesting. So, one of the things that always fascinated me with the PPC stuff was that you had all these people who built these really complex systems for their businesses. For a while, a lot of that was kind of more on the black hat side. It was like, how do I get reviews? But they'd have these chat bots and these customer flows and these like big maps and stuff like that. And I'd be like, what you're doing is actually pretty complex. But then when it gets to this giant wall of numbers, you're like, I throw my hands up. Like, I can't figure it out. And so that's where the software tools and the agencies came in, right? And so again, these software tools were almost exclusively built by people who were Amazon operators who said, well, I've got a formula that kind of works. And so let me build that formula into a rules engine. And then I'll deploy that rules engine and people will be excited, right? And some of it aggregated some data in some interesting ways. It's not to say that there's nothing that's okay. There's a couple of things that are okay. But there was nothing where I was like, oh, this is the killer app. This is the solution. And then you have all these agencies, and it's kind of a similar thing where they were like, hey, we've got processes that work. Like, again, people like myself were like, I know how to run Amazon PPC pretty well. But again, I'm doing spreadsheets. I'm, maybe aggregating some of this data in some interesting ways. But, basically it's just this giant group of people throwing their hands up. And, cut to now, like, sure, there's some AI tools. You can put some stuff in there and be like, Claude, do a account, audit, right? And it's going to do an okay job. But if you don't have those intricacies built in and really understand the market, and again, like you guys are now with a bunch of customers looking at all of this data on a bigger level, so you can see more macro patterns and like really understand the dynamics of things on a day-to-day basis, because things change. Like Halloween, when everyone goes out trick-or-treating, nobody's buying anything, right? And so you're like, oh, maybe a parent is like looking at something on their phone, but they're probably not buying. So, like put bids down at those times. Like Christmas Day, in the afternoon, kind of the opposite. It's like, oh, people are like sitting there being like, well, I didn't get this. I wanted that. So like now they're shopping for things, right? And so there's these weird patterns of times when things are really good and times where things are really bad. And there's times when it's lots of customers, but no, real intent to purchase. So it's a lot of shopping and clicking. And there's times where kind of the opposite, where people are just like, oh, click buy, right? And again, like none of the solutions out there really address that. And so I hired an agency at the beginning of last year because I had another business I was working on for about 8 or 9 months. And I was just like, I don't have the time to do this anymore. And I'm not psyched about it, but I hired an agency and I was like, well, this is annoying because now I'm paying them money, but my performance is like exactly the same. In some places lower, in some places higher. And I was like, this is not great because you're just doing the same thing I was doing and sometimes not as well. And so, but I just didn't have the time. And so I was like, okay, whatever, I'll commit to this agency. I'll see what happens. And I never once was I like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, I'm really impressed. I was always like, okay, thanks. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to you next week.
Yeah. And
So-
I think within a month and a half of us building out the first product, that was about when you gained conviction to just fully fire your agency.
Totally. And I was like, okay, see you guys later.
Yeah.
These guys are doing it now. And again, profit went up like 15% like the first week and just kind of has stayed there.
Yeah.
Maybe, some gains have gone a little bit up over time, but it's just so easy. I just don't have to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the way we see it is, I think a lot of agency services are basically customer support and customer service businesses and less actually performance businesses.
Yep.
I mean, we do maintain communication channels with our customers. Like there are certain strategic inputs that we kind of need to consider. For example, if like one variation of product is a loss leader and the higher count,
or if a product is stocking out, like, hey, we need to ramp things down. Like, how do we do that appropriately? Like, there's definitely stuff like that. But the whole kind of thesis here is like all these things you think are important, like may not be important. Like you don't know what's important because you're not actually like looking at all the data in like an aggregated, intelligent way. You're everything with the agencies and everything with these software tools is very reactive.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's, you're reacting to yesterday's news, right? You're like, oh, this happened, so now we adjust, right? And like, I'll give away one thing that we've talked about was like just doing some basic customer pricing monitoring.
Yes,
and just
exactly.
Be like, oh, like, because I remember a very specific example where we had competitor. We had a competitor who ran a deal. Our ads went like totally sour. All of a sudden, our normalized like standard, this is the margin we pay on our ads, went through the roof. And 3 or 4 days later, I caught it and I was like, oh man, I just wasted like a bunch of money on stuff that we should have ramped down right away. And so that was one of the early things we talked about. We're like, just do some basic competitor pricing monitoring and just figure out, be way more reactive, right? Like you could be reactive, but you need to be reactive in the day.
No,
you can't be reactive from stuff that happened a week ago because that's old data. Like that's already out of the system maybe. And you're still reacting to it, and now you're swerving, right? So a lot of the agencies and the tools, they're constantly swerving, looking for the middle of the road, but they're going off the shoulder on either side, and you're like verging into oncoming traffic, rather than being like, oh, I'm going to make a slight steering correction, this way, that way. I'm going to change lanes, right? You're not steer off the side of the road, try to get to your destination.
No, 100%, yeah. And like to the point about this whole like. Regardless, there is like a customer relationship component. But at the end of the day, like we want people to use us and we want people to stay with us, not just because they like us as people, but because we just drive better performance. Right. And that's kind of like our guiding philosophy and like how we build product and how we build like our relationship with our customers is actually like, hey, we want to get it to the point where folks never have to think about their ads again. I think for you, like, how often do you check our performance?
Never.
Yeah.
I have my own internal metrics where I look at profit. Right? So I'm just looking at that profit number. And that profit number has just been like so solid since we turned everything over. I've done nothing differently. Like everything I'm doing is the same. And I think the other thing too is like, if you look at who these agencies and who the software providers are catering to, they're mostly catering to the uninformed. No offense to people. Like, again, there are a lot of people who are really talented at a lot of things.
I mean, it's also hard to learn.
But usually it's not PPC, right?
Yeah.
You're catering to me. Like I was like, Bill, like, as we're working together, I'm like, this is what I want to see. And so you're catering to someone who's like, run $40 or $50 million of like ad spend across agencies and businesses and stuff like that.
I mean, you had a consultancy.
Exactly. And I'm like, I think I know what I'm doing. Like build the tools that I want to see. Obviously you guys had your own complete cut at things and we're bringing in all this, computer science and, mathematics that like I didn't know anything about. And sometimes I'm like, don't get me into the math. All right. I'm good at like, algebra, right? Like I'm very good at basic mathematics. I'm very good at like core finance stuff like, ROI and things like that. Like, but I'm not going to go into all the like topographical models.
Yeah. All the probabilistic modeling.
All the probabilistic models. All that stuff is crazy.
Even like probabilistic is a really long word. Right?
Exactly. It's too long. And I'm a smart guy, right? But you guys were building it like we were kind of helping each other build this together. And so I was like, no, let's build it to like an A+. Like, let's not build it to a B-. But most people, if they tried to do it themselves, we're going to get a D. And so you're like, an agency coming in and giving you a B- would be pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Or a software tool coming in and giving you a B-, you'd be like, this is great. I was going to fail the class otherwise, or, barely scrape by. But I was like, what if someone actually tried to get like an A or A+ in this?
Exactly.
And you're like, okay, that would actually be like the killer app for this space.
And I think, we started off like thinking about this in the sense of like, how can we build tools to help people do it themselves? But then we realized like what we kind of talked about, it's like, oh, you don't need tools, right? You can just do it and do it better.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, why would you want to do it yourself if somebody else can 100%. Do it so much better than
Exactly.
you, right?
And, it's incredible. And, I just want to really drive home why these whole like rules engines really don't work.
Yeah.
Because like, you set like a target ACOS or a target TACOS, and it's just such a stupid metric.
Totally.
Like, it makes no sense.
No.
Because, okay, let's say what actually happens in practice, right, is, you give your agency a target ACOS or you give a software tool a target ACOS, and they're like, okay, we want to make sure we hit this no matter what.
Exactly.
Because they're like, oh, you told us that this was a number and we hit it, so I guess you can't fire us. Right. And what they do is, okay, if you have like an ACOS of like 30%, and you want to hit a target ACOS of 20%, they're just going to lower bids by a third. But that completely ignores the fact that the conversion rates for each of the clicks that you're getting at a lower price are also lower. So you get trapped in this like ACOS jail, right? Where you're continually lowering bids until you basically get very minimal volume, which basically means either you're running your account on fumes or you're getting hoodwinked into basically overpaying and being unprofitable with your ad spend and your ad sales because, like the folks who are running it don't know any better, right? And again, I don't think it's like a statement of blame or a statement of fault.
It's not malicious. It's not. It's just the way the system was created and the existing like infrastructure there to help you, which again I was always like I had some of these ideas, some of the things you guys have now built into the software. I had them 6 years ago. I was like, how did no one build them in 6 years?
I mean, I can kind of explain this too, because it's a very like fundamentally quantitative finance problem in the sense that, you realize that in the 1980s to trade stocks, what people would do is go to a broker, and these brokers would go on the trading floor of like the New York Stock Exchange or like the Chicago trading pits, right? And they literally raise their hand saying, I want to sell a stock of Apple, right? And then someone would hear that, walk up to you, you'd say a number, they'd say a number, you'd say a number again, they'd say a number again, and you get somewhere in the middle where it's like, you're both not really happy with it, but it's kind of okay, so you take it.
Yeah, it's the best worst solution.
Yeah. Obviously, over the decades, that has changed from this in-person, manual, inefficient process to being completely algorithmic, to being completely model-driven, to, having like these advanced statistical frameworks that, guys like my co-founder Leo were building at these different hedge funds. And now there's barely anyone on the trading floor. And everyone, like most of the trading volume is completely algorithmic, right? And I think that's kind of how we see ourselves, in the sense that, hey, we're kind of bringing this like 2026, 2027 technology that is at the cutting edge of like financial markets and applying it to advertising. Because at the end of the day, like what we realize that makes me so excited about this problem is that advertising is a fundamentally finance problem.
Yeah,
in the sense that you set predetermined bids on keywords, and whenever a customer searches something that matches a keyword, you submit that in a second price auction, and then Amazon decides the listing based off of a combination of like bid and like product relevance and all that stuff. In the same way that for a stock exchange, you submit a price for an order, and that gets matched up to someone else on the internal financial exchange, right? And it's exactly one-to-one mapping. It makes so much sense why, like, it makes so much sense why no one's built this before, because no one's actually come at this problem from the kind of technical expertise and from the internal framework that Leo and I are, right? And that's kind of what gets me so excited when I talk about this, and why I've been so excited to talk to you on this podcast, because every single time I think about it, it's like, oh my God, yes, like this is what we're going to spend the next 10, 20, 30 years doing. And like, part of like the staying up at night, not sleeping is because, yes, like I'm worried, I'm stressed, I want to make sure we're doing well. But it's also because I can't think about anything else.
I know.
Like if I go to sleep, if I try to go to sleep and I'm not completely mentally exhausted, my mind is running on all these different ideas.
And I remember exactly that phase in Impressa, like the first 2.5 years, where I would wake up the next day and be like, "Oh, like what am I going to do? Like I'm going to try to launch this random product today. I'm going to try to launch this random product." And
I mean, you still are launching products.
We're still launching products. I wouldn't say with the same verve and excitement that I did when I was, 28 years old and building my first business. It's not quite the same level of excitement anymore. I get a lot of joy out of a lot of other things, like my family, my friends, fun trips, and just kind of like living daily life. It's not quite the same anymore, unfortunately. Always looking for that, but not quite finding it, unfortunately. But when working with you guys has actually been like a massive boost on the work kind of enjoyment side of things, because I was like, oh, this is the team I would have loved to hire, but could have never hired and managed to build this. Who was like going and doing this thing, and I just get to sit in the sidelines and be like, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
I mean, the way I see us is like we're just kind of like a huge monster truck just barreling down the dirt roads, steamrolling any kind of like trees or foliage along the way. It's just I feel like the momentum I'm feeling from myself. And the
momentum
is incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I want to circle back to Impreza again. You ended up getting acquired.
We did.
Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, I can walk you through that process a bit. So, kind of 2020, 2021, tons of money. I think something like $15 billion or so in equity and debt capital got raised to go roll up our industry. I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I'll keep it kind of tighter here.
Episode 2.
Yeah, another episode. But, all these aggregators were popping up trying to become this next kind of like Procter and Gamble. They were the pitch was essentially Procter and Gamble for the digital age, right? This massive portfolio of products. There would be synergies. You would get a variety of, taking things internationally, taking them into stores, all this stuff. I didn't really think there was I didn't have high conviction in that business model working out. But at the same time, there were a bunch of people who were saying, hey, we'll buy your business for, a lot more than they were saying that a couple years before that, because we had looked at selling our business a couple times and it just never really worked out for a variety of reasons. And so kind of, COVID hit, March 2020. There was a time where we were like, oh, is our business going away? Because we were like, what about warehouses? What about, all these like production in China? What about shipping? Like all these things. But it turned out that actually what happened was our business basically doubled, from April 2021 and kind of onwards. And so towards the end of that year, started thinking about like, hey, there's all these people who are building these aggregators. They're buying a lot of businesses. There's like a lot of people who are interested in this right now. Like, it's probably a great time to sell, right? And so then, kind of was thinking about that late 2020, early 2021, started kind of getting all my ducks in a row and putting everything together. And, here I was, this like ex-investment banker, ex-private equity, investor being like, ooh, I get to do this for my own business. Like it was almost like my graduate thesis in some way where I'm like, let me sell my own business. Right. And so, my business partner and I were like, the time is right. And, I ran super, super hard at it for, a couple months, talked to everybody. And I mean, I expanded the opportunity set much wider than most Amazon sellers who just talk to aggregators. Like I talked to private equity funds, I talked to mezzanine capital providers, thinking we do maybe a partial cash out, but stay in. But I also had a young baby at the time, and I was just like, I want to get out. Like the time is right. I need to get out. And so, talked to everybody who was worth talking to, got all the different offers, and then ultimately, found a really great partner who we loved working with. That was incredible, and sold to them in April 2021, and had a pretty quick transition out. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm done.
Yeah. I mean, I hear this is like the third or fourth time I've heard this story, and I'm just in like constant awe and admiration.
Yeah, it was a weird time. It was kind of a crazy time. Interest rates were at zero.
Yeah.
Lots of money was being raised. I mean, looking back at it, like it's, it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
Right? That was unsustainable.
Yeah.
But for myself and the myriad, set of people who got out, at the top, like, amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And I just want to highlight, this might have gotten lost in the episode, but like you started this brand with just $12,000 in cash.
We put in $12,000 in cash.
Yeah.
And I used my like private equity, like return on invested capital and like, inventory cycle times and like, what's the cash generation machine like look like. And, we turned that into $40 million of revenue, very profitable revenue at the end. And it was kind of crazy, even looking back at it now, I'm like, how did that math work that in 7 years we turned $12,000 into that?
I mean, it's incredible.
But that's all we needed to do. Like, and at the time, especially, and we got kind of lucky, right? So like we had a product, like one of our first products that we launched was a product that had a really tight turnaround between like ordering product and getting the cash back. And we were able to produce it. I mean, we produced a bunch of it ourselves. Like it was a lubricant for treadmills, and the first 2,500 bottles we bottled ourselves in, my business partner's backyard. Basically.
Yeah.
And so that one was like, oh, put, $5,000 in there, get $20,000 back. Like 2 months later, I was like, what the hell is going on? And so that really fed the machine. And then we were able to just deploy that same model. And we had some insane, like 900% return on invested capital or something like that at the end. Like, because we were launching all these products. We're like, and I was, I brought that same kind of private equity mindset, which is like, margins aren't as important as return on invested capital, basically. So like if I'm putting $1 into inventory, how many dollars am I getting back and how quickly am I getting that back? And that's actually, I think, like in terms of being an Amazon operator, in addition to the fact that they should hire you guys to run their PPC, I think that's the other big takeaway people could get is thinking of your business the same way an investor would think about the business, which is return on invested capital. How much money do you need to put in? How much money do you make? How quickly do you get it back? And does that meet kind of basic investment thresholds? Or should you actually be putting your money somewhere else? Because if you're doing a 5% return on invested capital, if you've got $10 million in your business and you're only making $500,000 a year, there's better ways to use that money, right? Like you can put that money, like you could just invest in the stock market and just sit back and never have to think about it and not have to run a business. So I'd say that was another key to success for us, was to really think about the like, again, thinking like an investor would think about a business. And that was really helpful.
And I really want to double click into this, like return on invested capital over margin percentage, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people try to optimize things like ACoS or ROAS or tacos in the advertising space. And again, it's just a completely wrong model, because like if you want to optimize for tacos, then you should spend $0 on ad spend to always get a 0% tacos.
Totally.
Right. Likewise, if you want to advertise or if you want to optimize for ROAS or ACoS, then like you can scale your ads down and make sure you like only
glory metrics.
Exactly.
Right? You can always have a glory metric.
Yeah. And that's kind of the reason why I think hearing this from you once or twice at the very beginning was like, okay, the mental unlock for us is that we optimize for total profits.
Total profit.
Ad sales plus organic sales minus ad spend.
Totally.
Right. And that is, I think, why we are able to actually deliver such like, outsized performance improvements, is because we're treating this like a business.
Yes.
We're trying to improve your business, not provide a service, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Right.
So you have to think about what makes the person sitting on the other side happy.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody wants to make more money, like unquestionably.
Yeah.
Right. But then you get into like classic human behavior stuff where people have something stuck in their brain. Like they're like, oh, I should be doing this. I should be hitting this number. These should be my metrics. And then if you hit those numbers, but don't deliver the profit improvement, then they're like semi-satisfied and certainly not like enough to like not fire an agency, right? Not switch to another agency. But yeah, one of the things we talked about very early on is I'm like, the right way to run this business, which is the right way to run a lot of businesses, but like, again, trying to apply like some of these kind of investor mindsets is, I want you to maximize my profit for these products over the next 2 to 3 years. Not the next 6 months, not the next month, not a year from now, that entire like area under the curve. And if you can hit that maximal place of that area under the curve of what does my next 2 to 3 years of profit look like from this product, boom, that's like, how could you beat that? That's the number one way to like succeed, essentially.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've tried to build. All right, I know we've talked for a while, Aaron. You've got to get home to your daughter. I've never asked this question before, but what do you think about us as a team in the last few months you've been working with us?
Yeah, I mean, like, great things. It's been so interesting because, and one of the things listen, I'm not old, but I'm 39. Okay. You guys are young, and seeing your enthusiasm and excitement and commitment has been really exciting to me. Like, I'm almost, there's a way in which I'm kind of like living vicariously through you guys, right? Like, I'm invested. I have, I'll get a return if things go well. I know they're going to go well because you guys are doing super well. But I'm also just like, oh, this is fun for me. I get to work with these guys and see them crush it and iterate so rapidly and be really intellectually honest, which is like basically my number one thing. Like, intellectual honesty above all, because if you're not being intellectually honest, like, one, I can't trust you, and two, you're going to make mistakes at some point in time. I can't tell you when, but you're going to make mistakes out of ego, out of like bravado, like whatever. And so it's been really good to see you guys be like low ego, high intellectually honest, like really rapid development. Again, like with that intellectual honesty, like not being married to like, oh, well, we know how to think about this. You're like, yeah, we don't know about that. Like, tell us about that. And I'll tell you about it. And you'll be like, oh, okay. Like, this hits all these like, centers in our brains. And we're like, ooh, let me like, it's, okay. So it's been amazing just to see you guys, kind of take this thing that wasn't a business, 6-9 months ago and really turn it into a business really, really quickly and, rapidly iterate. Like, all these things have been really exciting for me and just like really cool. And again, it's that trust. Like we talked about, I was ready to turn my account over to you. Like way before I think you guys were like in your stomachs, like nervous wise, like ready for me to turn it over. But I had high confidence and high faith just because of like what I could gather about you guys as people and seeing you work. And so, it's been really fun and really exciting for me to kind of like ride along on this ride.
All right. Well, I think that's an amazing place to end off. Aaron, thank you so much for hopping on here. Again, I've been so excited to do this for weeks now. And I'm really glad we had the opportunity to sit down here and chat. So thank you.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
It's been amazing.
Great stuff. I'm really excited to keep being along for the ride.
All right. Wonderful. Well,
Thanks.
All right.